Hey everyone, Sparks back with another Goddess Victory Nikke video. Our maintenance is over, the update is here. The question is Raven good? So they always said that they were fixing something with the solo raid, but they also acknowledged that there was a problem with Raven, and she was performing badly. She was not performing how the community wanted her to, and probably not how the devs wanted her to either. There was a problem with her sustained or dot damage. I talked about it before. Link to a video in the description below where I did live testing on her. You can see how that originally went. But the question is now, is she good? So let's actually see if anything changed about her. So I'm just going to jump in while we're talking here, and I'm going to do the exact same test with the exact same team as I did before. Now, here are the previous damage numbers for Raven versus Eve and Mihara. The reason why these are kind of the main points of comparison is because, you know, Eve is the other collab character, they're also both iron, and then Mihara is the other big sustained damage dealer. So that's kind of our biggest points of comparison here. Mihara is not getting the burst, so keep that in mind as well. Now, the previous damage for Raven was 1.7 billion. Hopefully this goes up quite a bit. We'll see, we'll see. Now, both my Raven and my Eve are slightly stronger than they were during original testing, so expect all damage numbers to go up a little bit, but we want to see kind of the percentage difference between, you know, Raven and Eve versus previously. Now, I do expect this to go up. I don't expect Raven to suddenly be like insanely powerful. I will also do another test right after this versus Kraken, and we can compare that as well, because Kraken has a bunch of parts and we can see if she's a lot better in that scenario. But first I kind of want to do this more controlled test. I am fighting a boss that is weak to iron. Now this should be advantage Eve, because a lot of Eve's kit triggers off of having elemental advantage. Of course, you know, Raven will also have elemental damage here, but Eve's kit is kind of oriented around getting even more benefits with that elemental advantage. And when we shift to Kraken, the advantage might change more to Raven, because neither one is going to have elemental damage, and then Raven's kit revolves around being able to have parts destroyed, which Kraken has constant parts to destroy, so we'll see how that goes. Like I said, I would be surprised if Raven is suddenly like the best unit in the game, but we'll see if she can catch up with Eve. If she's more applicable universally than she used to be, and if she can be as good or, you know, even better than Mihara. The major disadvantage to Mihara in this situation is obviously Mihara isn't getting to burst, and Mihara doesn't have elemental damage. Now, Mihara is an overspec unit, so just her baseline power level should be stronger. So, you know, just because Raven isn't as good as her doesn't necessarily mean that Raven is bad. But in this specific situation, I would hope that, or for the test we're doing here as well as against Kraken, I would hope that Raven would outperform Mihara, because Mihara does not have that elemental damage. But we'll see how this goes. It's kind of interesting that all of this was really low key. Shift Up didn't really make major announcements about this. You know, they talked a lot about fixing issues in the solo raid, as well as some other like random like visual issues and things like that. But they were very ambiguous about anything happening with Raven. You know, maybe they're just trying to like save face and make sure that like they don't get a lot of public heat, and like acknowledging that like the, you know, collab has problems and things like that. I don't know. I mean, as long as they fix it, they fix it. Okay, here we go. We have our results. And total damage, so this was from a different team that you're seeing my best damage here, so don't worry about that. But let's see what the individual damage numbers look like. All right, Raven did way more damage than previously. Eve also did quite a bit more damage here. So Eve was previously doing 2.8. Sorry, I have like a screenshot over here off to the side. That's why I was like leaning way over there. Eve previously did 2.8 billion, and she's now doing over 3 billion. So definitely an increase there, just from me getting Eve a little bit more optimized. But Raven massively increasing. So Raven was previously only doing about 60% of Eve's damage. Raven is now doing more like 90% of Eve's damage with 2.9 billion compared to her 1.8 previously. So huge improvement. Raven is obviously a lot better here, you know, both just objectively and relatively here. And again, the relative score is what's more important, since they've both changed a little bit since my previous test here, but that's a massive increase. And she's now far outperforming Mihara in this situation, which, again, not really a fair test to Mihara, but this is good. This is good. I like this. Okay, so now let's go check her out in the Kraken fight. Okay, we're getting into the Kraken fight now, and I do want to say, even though the last situation was in theory kind of advantage Eve, it was also not an ideal situation for Eve because a lot of her kit revolves around getting those critical hits, right? And that squad was not at all built around critical hits. Here we have Helm helping her out a little bit. You can get even more crit damage by pairing her with the maids. But, you know, this should actually help Eve a little bit more. However, having a bunch of parts to destroy is going to be a really big boost to Raven. So if Raven is ever going to do better than Eve, this is where it's going to happen because, again, Eve does not have the elemental advantage, which is what a lot of her kit revolves around. The only real help to Eve in this situation is, again, she's going to get more crit help from Helm in this case, which she did not have in the previous scenario. I'm not even bothering to use Mihara in this test because we already saw that she could be outperformed, and this is just, you know, would be a dumb situation to bring Mihara into anyway. So we're coming up here on our tier 5 damage. And let me know what you guys think this is going to turn out like. Do you think Raven is going to be like way ahead of Eve in this situation? Again, Raven needs to do well here because this is kind of like her ideal situation. Now, in theory, you know, if there was an Iron Weak boss that also had a ton of regenerating parts, that would be even better. But there isn't something like that that we can easily test on. So, you know, this is the next best thing. And relatively speaking, with the comparison of Raven to Eve, this is actually an even better scenario for Raven because Eve would be getting all those elemental extra parts of her kit going off. So Raven, is she still mid if she doesn't outperform Eve in this situation? I could kind of see the argument for that. We'll see, though. We'll see. We'll see. Hopefully we survive through this. Yeah, we did. Okay. This isn't the most ideal team, so, I mean, as long as we get to tier 7, that's cool. I'm doing a mock battle, so I don't waste one of my runs anyway. I will be doing all my real runs later today on stream, so I'll see you guys in a few hours. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. It would really help me out. And that way you won't miss any valuable news or testing. And just hanging out on stream. We have a really good community. By the way, speaking of community, link to my Discord in the description below. We have a good group of chill people and a lot of active players and competitive players as well. Alright, 5 seconds left. Almost made it to tier right there. Okay, so let's see what the damage looks like. All right, Little Mermaid, major carry here, no surprise. And Raven did, in fact, outperform Eve. Now, not by a lot. We have 9.3 million, or 9.3 billion. That's how numbers work. And then compared to 8.4 billion from Eve. So not a massive increase, but it kind of flipped. So now Raven is doing about 10% more than Eve versus in the last test, Eve was doing about 10% more than Raven. So I want to say it's looking like Raven is now on a very similar power level to Eve, and Eve is a very, very strong unit. Despite what some of the community has come out with saying that they wish she was OP or whatever, Eve is generally the second strongest Iron type attacker in the game. There are some situations where Red Hood is going to outperform her, and of course Rappy is like always going to outperform literally anybody in the game. But Eve is a very, very good unit, and Raven is now looking like she is close to Eve, although I would say in most situations Eve is probably still the better unit. And you know, Raven is still more situational, and but you know, again, like close to Eve. If you know, like if Eve is a 10, then Raven's probably like a 9, right? So very, very similar situation. I think this is a good update. This is much more what I would want and expect from Raven. And you know, because previously she just wasn't performing, right? Let's go ahead and get her up on the screen. Hello, Eve. Hello, Eve again. There we go. We got Raven. Get her MLB one up here. Of course, it's the last one we go to. Might as well end the video on her there. So yeah, testing results very favorable to Raven. I'd say she's, you know, up there now, and looking forward to using her more and getting more into the solo raid once we get the higher levels, and we can do like a strategy video for that later on. So make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss that. Let me know how you like Raven. If you were holding off, does this convince you to pull for her? I would say she's definitely worth pulling now, far better than she was previously. All right, I will catch you guys in the next video or stream.